Divorce isn't the end. It's the beginning of a war. For 7 years, I've been paying the mortgage alone. The court left the apartment to me. But my ex-mother-in-law, a real predator, thinks I robbed her family. She won't back down. She's already plotting, dragging her mama's boy into it. They're plotting to take away the only thing I earned with sweat and blood. They even invited themselves to my anniversary, setting a trap. They think I don't see their game, but I have my own surprise ready. And they'll remember this holiday for a long time. Hello, dear listeners. Glad to hear from you. I present to you a new, interesting story. Enjoy listening. The court's decision arrived at the end of October, when a light rain was already falling outside, and the apartment on Chistoprudny smelled of freshly brewed coffee and a strange emptiness. Dasha sat in the kitchen, holding the sealed sheets of paper in her hands, unable to believe that these papers marked the end of 7 years of her life. The apartment remained hers entirely. The court took into account one simple fact, which Kirill had been brushing aside all this time. For years, she paid the mortgage alone, every month without fail, without asking for help. Kirill worked here and there. He was always promising something, talking about prospects, about connections that were about to take off. She transferred money to the bank, saved on lunches, and saved from bonuses. Now here's the result. The cold lines of the court decision stated that citizen Daria Sergeyevna Ryabanina had full ownership of the one-room apartment at 10 Chistoprudny Boulevard, apartment 42. Her ex-husband had no relationship to the property. It doesn't. Dasha sipped her coffee and glanced at her watch. Kirill was supposed to arrive for his things in half an hour. She'd specifically chosen a weekday when she was working remotely. She didn't want him rummaging around the apartment while she was gone. She hadn't trusted him for a long time. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. Kirill stood at the threshold with a large duffel bag and a guilty expression. Over 7 years of marriage, Dasha had memorized that expression. The downturned corners of his lips, the furrowed brow, an attempt to feign remorse. "Hello," he muttered, stepping over the threshold. "I won't be long." "Take your time," Dasha replied evenly. "Just tidy up the hallway when you get ready." Kirill nodded and went into the room. Dasha remained in the kitchen. She listened to him open the closet and take out boxes of shoes. He rummaged through the chest of drawers. It was a strange feeling to watch the remnants of someone else's presence being cleared out of your life. It seemed like it should hurt, but instead a detachment washed over her, as if all this. It wasn't happening to her. 40 minutes later, Kirill showed up with a stuffed bag and 2 plastic bags. He began, stopping at the door. "I understand that everything didn't work out as we planned, but Kirill," Dasha interrupted, without looking up from her laptop. "We didn't plan anything. I planned, paid, pulled through. You just lived." He swallowed and shifted his weight. "Mom said I could stay with her until I found something of my own." "Of course, Mom. Lada Mikhailovna." Dasha smiled, but remained silent. What can you say? A 35-year-old man runs to his mother because he couldn't build his own life in a natural way. "Good luck," she squeezed out. "Leave the keys on the shelf." Kirill put down the key ring with 2 keys to the apartment and the mailbox. He nodded obediently and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Dasha sat in the kitchen for another 10 minutes, just looking out the window. The rain intensified. Tracks of water ran down the glass. Inside, it was empty, but peaceful. That same evening, Lada Mikhailovna welcomed her son with open arms. She lived in a 3-room apartment on Shelkovskaya Street in a building with peeling plaster and a creaky elevator. The apartment was furnished with furniture from the 90s. A heavy dark wood wall, a sofa with worn upholstery, carpets on the walls, and the smell of borscht and some cloying perfume that Lada Mikhailovna poured into the humidifier. Well, son, you're back home, she said, patting Kirill on the shoulder. I told you this idea would lead to nothing good. Kirill took off his jacket and threw his bag in corner. Mom, not now. Not what? Tell the truth. Lada Mikhailovna went into the kitchen and took a saucepan out of the fridge. I always knew she wasn't right for you. Too smart, too independent. Just give those kinds of people free rein. They'll sit on your neck and turn heads. Kirill sank tiredly into a chair. She wanted me to earn more, to help with the mortgage. Ha! Lada Mikhailovna poured the borscht into bowls and placed one in front of her son. And whose apartment was it originally? Mine. I transferred it to you 10 years ago. I thought you'd start a normal family, that I'd live to see grandchildren. But she took it for herself, as if it were her own money. Mom, the court ruled. The court, Lada Mikhailovna snorted. The courts always decide on the side of the women these days. I cried there, don't worry about how I carried it all alone. And the fact that our apartment is a family one, so to speak, no one cares. Kirill was silent, slurping his borscht. There was no point in arguing with his mother. She always thought Dasha was unworthy of their family. Too simple, too poor. Too stubborn. Lada Mikhailovna dreamed of a different daughter-in-law, one from a respectable family, with connections and an inheritance, but she got an economist from the Moscow region, who toiled in banks and didn't feel the need to constantly ask her mother-in-law's opinion. You know, Lada Mikhailovna drawled, sitting down across from him. That apartment has always been ours and should remain ours. Kirill looked up. Mom, the court's decision is final, everything is spelled out there. The decision can be appealed, Lada Mikhailovna bluntly stated. Or find another solution. What's the solution? She smiled, but it was somehow predatory. I'll think about it. I have friends who understand these matters. Kirill shrugged and continued eating. Lada Mikhailovna was already figuring out who to call. She had old connections, people who, for a bottle of cognac, could tell her how to get around the law. Not break it, but get around it. It was a fine line, but it existed. The next day, while Kirill was looking for work through his contacts, Lada Mikhailovna dialed her old friend Vitaly Semenovic. He used to work in a law firm, then went freelance and consulted privately. Not the most conscientious professional, but competent. They met in a small cafe near the metro and ordered a cup of tea. Lada Mikhailovna explained the situation. Vitaly Semenovic listened, nodded, and wrote something down in a notebook. Do you understand, Lada Mikhailovna? He began when she finished. If a court decision has already entered into force, it's difficult to appeal. New circumstances, new evidence are needed, and judging by. No, according to your story. But there must be some other option, she insisted. Vitaly Semenovic rubbed the bridge of his nose, thinking. There is one scheme, but it's, shall we say, not entirely legal. Or rather, it's in a gray area. What is it? If your son's ex-wife voluntarily leaves the apartment for at least a day, and during that time he changes the locks and moves in, a precedent can be established for actual residence. Then, in court, prove that she actually abandoned the apartment, didn't live there, and didn't pay the utilities. It's a long process. But sometimes it works. Lada Mikhailovna frowned. So, she needs to go somewhere? Well, yes. On a business trip, on vacation, to visit relatives. The main thing is that she's absent and can't return quickly. And in the meantime, your son changes the locks, moves in, starts paying for utilities in his own name, and that's it, the rest is a matter of technique. But she'll call the police. The police, Vitaly Semenovic corrected. She'll call, of course, but only if your son presents any documents confirming that the apartment was previously registered in his name, if he says that. She moved out herself, abandoned the apartment, and the police won't investigate on the spot. They'll say, settle it in court. And while the proceedings are ongoing, he's already living there. The fact of his residence is clear. Lada Mikhailovna nodded slowly, digesting the information. The scheme seemed risky, but not hopeless. The main thing was to find a moment when Dasha would leave or be gone from the apartment for a long time. "How much do your consultations cost?" she asked, taking out her wallet. "For you, Lada Mikhailovna, it's free," Vitaly smiled. "Semenovic. We're old friends, but keep in mind, this is all at your own risk. If anything goes wrong, it's not my fault." Of course," she assured him. "Thank you very much." They said goodbye, and Lada Mikhailovna went home with the feeling that the plan was starting to come together. She just needed to wait for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, in the apartment on Chistoprudny, Dasha was sitting at her laptop, scrolling through a real estate listing. She had no illusions about Lada Mikhailovna. She knew she wouldn't. She'll just leave everything as is. For too many years, her mother-in-law had been repeating that the apartment belonged to the Ryabinins family, that Dasha was a temporary guest, and that the real rights remained with them. After the divorce, Dasha expected a trick, calls, threats, attempts to pressure her through Kirill, but 2 weeks passed and nothing happened. Silence. Suspicious silence. Lada Mikhailovna seemed to have vanished. She didn't call, didn't send angry messages. Dasha understood this calm before the storm and decided to act first. She opened the real estate agency's website, found their contact information. Dialed the number, and a pleasant woman answered, introducing herself as Elena. "Good evening. I'd like to know how quickly I can sell a one-bedroom apartment on Chistoprudny," Dasha asked, trying to sound confident. "It depends on the price," Elena replied. "If the price is reasonable, we can find buyers in a week or 2. The area is good, there's demand. We can meet tomorrow, look at the apartment, and discuss the details." "Okay," Dasha agreed. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m. will suit you." "Great. Send me your address, and I'll come by." Dasha dictated the address, said goodbye, and leaned back in her chair. Her heart was pounding, her palms were sweaty. Selling the apartment on which she'd been paying a mortgage for 7 years was a serious step. But she saw no other way out. If Lada Mikhailovna had her mind set on something, it would be best to eliminate the main object of her desires. Simple, quick, and final. Elena turned out to be a punctual woman of about 40, wearing a formal pantsuit and a businesslike smile. She walked around the apartment, clucked her tongue, and jotted something down on her tablet. "Not bad," she concluded. "The renovations are fresh, you can leave the furniture or take it, as you wish. The area is prestigious, the metro is nearby. I would advise listing it for 9 million. It's realistic to sell for 8.8. That would be fine." Dasha nodded. The mortgage was paid off 6 months ago. She made the last payment in May. 8.8, that's good money. You can put it in the bank, rent something smaller, simpler, live quietly until you decide what to do next. "That would be fine," she said. "When can we start?" "Even tomorrow. We'll sign the contract, I'll put up an ad, and get started. Bringing buyers. Apartments like these usually sell quickly." They signed the contract the next day. Elena was right. A week later, the first applicants arrived. A young couple with a 3-year-old child, both employed and with good references. The husband introduced himself as Anton, a local police officer, and his wife, Svetlana, an accountant. They were moving from a communal apartment under the resettlement program and had long dreamed of their own place. Dasha met them at the apartment, showed them around, and answered their questions. Svetlana exclaimed with delight, examining the kitchen, bathroom, and balcony. Anton silently examined the windows, checked the pipes, and knocked on the walls. "It suits us," he finally said. "We're ready to take it." "Excellent," Dasha nodded. "Then let's get to the paperwork." The deal went quickly, without a hitch. 3 weeks after the first call to the realtor, Dasha received the money in her account and handed over the keys to the new owners. Anton shook her hand, Svetlana hugged her, thanking her for her honesty and for not inflating the price. "Good luck to you," Dasha said, standing on the threshold of someone else's apartment. "Live happily." She left without looking back. It was the end of one stage in her life and the beginning of something new. It was still unclear, but definitely hers. Dasha didn't tell anyone about the sale. Not her friends, not her colleagues, and especially not Kirill or his mother. Why tease her mother-in-law ahead of time? Let her find out when the time comes, or not at all. That was also an option. Dasha rented a one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city in a new building near the Vaikino station. The apartment was small but bright, with large windows and a clean entrance hall. 30,000 a month was bearable. And she spread the money from the sale across deposits in 3 banks to create a serious safety net. For the first 2 weeks in the new place, she got used to the silence, to not having to jump up in the morning to Kirill's alarm, not having to listen to his endless phone conversations, not having to endure him throwing socks all over the apartment. Now there was order here. Her order. One evening, when Dasha was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and reading a book, her friend Katya called. "Dashka, when did you? Are you going to celebrate your birthday?" she asked without preamble. "I'm almost turning 30. Dasha thought about it. Indeed, she was turning 30 in 3 weeks. She usually didn't like big parties, but this time she wanted to celebrate, a new life, a new age, why not? "I guess I will," she replied. She needed to think about where. "Let's book a cafe," Katya suggested. "We'll get about 20 people together and have a nice get-together." "Okay," Dasha agreed. "I'll find a place. I'll send it to you." She hung up and thought about it. A cafe was a good idea, neutral territory, no memories, you could relax. Dasha went online, looked at reviews, and chose a cafe called Almond, not far from the center. Cozy, with good food and reasonable prices. She reserved a table for 20 people. She sent out invitations to friends, colleagues, and distant relatives. Naturally, she didn't invite Kirill. Why ruin her own celebration? And then, a week before her anniversary, Lada called her. Mikhailovna. Her mother-in-law's voice on the phone sounded unexpectedly soft, almost gentle. Dasha was even taken aback for a second. In 7 years of marriage, her mother-in-law had only addressed her in such a tone in front of strangers, for the sake of propriety. "Dashenka, hello," Lada Mikhailovna sang. "How are you? How are you?" "Hello," Dasha answered cautiously, putting the book aside. "Everything's fine." "That's good, that's wonderful. I was just thinking, you have a birthday soon, right? 30 years is a significant date, by the way, an anniversary." Dasha was silent, waiting for more. Lada Mikhailovna isn't the type to just call to chat. "Are you planning to celebrate?" continued the mother-in-law. "Yes, I'm planning a small celebration at a cafe." "Oh, how wonderful." Lada Mikhailovna feigned delight. "You know, I thought, we were family for 7 years, after all. Of course, everything didn't work out the way we wanted, but that's no reason to distance ourselves completely. Maybe I can come too. I'd like to congratulate you, wish you happiness, like a human being, without offense." Dasha clutched the phone tighter. Something coldly clenched inside. She was perfectly aware that Lada Mikhailovna didn't know how to be selflessly kind. Her every gesture, every word always had a purpose. But it was awkward to refuse her outright. After all, they had been formally considered a family for 7 years. "Okay," Dasha said slowly. "Come. The Almond Cafe on Marisika is on the 19th at 7 p.m. "Wonderful," Lada Mikhailovna exclaimed. "I'll definitely come. Thank you for not holding a grudge. You're a smart girl, Dasha." "I've always said that." She never said that, Dasha thought, but said it out loud. "Just until we meet again." Lada Mikhailovna said goodbye surprisingly warmly and hung up. Dasha sat for another minute with her phone in her hand, staring into space. Something was wrong here. Completely wrong. But she couldn't yet figure out what exactly. The next day, Dasha met with Elena, a realtor, at the bank to open a savings account. The money from the sale of the apartment was sitting in an account, and it needed to be managed wisely. She advised opening 3 savings accounts in different banks to be on the safe side. "These are unstable times," she explained. She said, while they waited in line to see the manager. "It's better not to put all your eggs in one basket. Split the 3 million each and sleep soundly." Dasha nodded. That made sense. She'd opened her first account here and planned to open the rest within a week. While the manager filled out the paperwork, Dasha absent-mindedly gazed out the window. The branch wasn't crowded. A few people were in line, consultants were at the counters. A typical weekday. The paperwork was processed quickly. Dasha received the contract, thanked the manager, and left the bank with a sense of accomplishment. Now she had a safety net. Now she could breathe freely. Meanwhile, in the apartment on Shyolkovskaya, Lada Mikhailovna sat in the kitchen across from Kirill and laid out the plan. Her son listened silently, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning. "You understand?" Lada Mikhailovna said, stirring sugar in his tea. "We'll only have one chance. When she's at the cafe with all the guests, you'll quietly leave. Say the phone's ringing, an urgent call. Go to Chistoprodny, call a locksmith, change the locks." "Mom." Kirill started, but she interrupted. "This is our legal way to get back what belongs to our family. The apartment was mine, I signed it over to you, so it should stay in the family." And Lada Mikhailovna pursed her lips in disdain. This upstart simply took advantage of the situation. "But I don't give a damn about the court's decision," Lada Mikhailovna snapped. Vitaly Semyonovich explained everything. "If you move in, start living there, pay the utilities, it will set a precedent. Then we'll prove in court that she abandoned the apartment, and that's it. It's in the bag." Kirill rubbed his face with his palms. "And if she comes back early, will she call the cops?" "She won't," Lada Mikhailovna said confidently. "The room will be full of guests. She won't want to ruin her holiday. And while she's sitting in the cafe, you'll do everything quickly and quietly." Kirill looked at his mother. There was a sparkle of excitement in her eyes. She was so confident of success that he didn't have the heart to object. He always listened to his mother. Since childhood, she knew better. She decided for him. She was in charge, and she still is. "Okay," he exhaled. "Let's try." "What a clever girl." Lada Mikhailovna smiled contentedly. "I knew you wouldn't let me down." They sat for a while longer, discussing the details. Kirill was supposed to find a locksmith in advance and arrange for him to be ready to come at any time. Lada Mikhailovna promised to pay for the services. She had been putting money aside specifically, just in case. A few days later, Kirill found a locksmith online. He agreed to change the locks without any questions for 3,000. Kirill wrote down his phone number and warned him. He'll call on the evening of the 19th. "I'll be ready," the master promised. "Just send me the address in advance." "I'll send it," Kirill assured. He hung up and felt the unpleasant claws of anxiety scrape at his stomach. Something about this whole idea was wrong. It was risky, but his mother insisted, and he couldn't refuse her. Never had. The 19th was approaching. Dasha reserved a table at Almond, ordered a cake from a nearby pastry shop, and made a guest list. Her friend Katya took charge of the organization. Of entertainment, promised to come up with a couple of contests so it wouldn't be boring. Just nothing vulgar, Dasha warned. I'm 30, not 18. Yes, I understand, Katya waved it off. Everything will be cultured and tasteful. 2 days before the holiday, Dasha received a bonus at work, a small but pleasant one. She decided to spend it on a new dress. She went to the mall, walked around the shops, chose a simple dark blue dress with long sleeves and a knee-length skirt. Nothing provocative, but elegant, tried it on, looked at herself in the mirror. The reflection smiled back at her. For the first time in a long time, Dasha felt like she liked what she saw. The impossible woman who carried a family and a mortgage, and there she was, free, calm, with a clear gaze. I'll take it, she told the saleswoman. The dress was packed. Dasha paid and left the store with the bag in her hand. It had gotten colder outside, the wind was ruffling her hair, but she was in a good mood. Ahead lay a celebration, a new life, new opportunities. The past was left behind along with Kirill, his mother, and the apartment on Chistoprodny, for which she had been paying off the loan for so many years. Now other people lived there, Anton, Svetlana, and their little son. Dasha caught herself wondering several times how they were doing there, whether they had settled in, whether they liked it. Svetlana wrote to her a couple of times in Messenger, thanking her for the apartment, sharing photos of how they were renovating the nursery, how they were installing new furniture. We are so happy, Svetlana wrote. Thank you so much for selling us this apartment. It's so special for us. It's a dream. Dasha answered briefly but warmly. She was pleased that the apartment had gone to good people, not random speculators, not greedy investors, but a normal family who would live there and raise a child. And she sometimes thought about what would have happened if Lada Mikhailovna had found out about the sale. How would she have reacted? She would probably have thrown a fit, accused them of all sorts of sins, and tried to challenge the deal. Although legally this was impossible. Everything was formalized according to the law, all the documents were signed. But Lada Mikhailovna, for now, she knew nothing, and Dasha wasn't going to tell her. Let her find out someday. The day before her birthday, Dasha called the cafe manager and clarified the details. The table was ready, the menu was agreed upon. The cake will be delivered by 9 p.m. Everything was going according to plan. That evening, she sat at home, drank tea, and thought about how strange life can be sometimes. Just 6 months ago, she was married, living in an apartment on Chistoprodny, dreaming of children, and now she's divorced, living in a rented apartment, and is just beginning to understand who she really is and what she wants. Maybe divorce is not the end, but the beginning, not defeat, but liberation. Maybe something good is ahead. Dasha didn't know for sure, but for the first time in a long time she felt hope. Her phone vibrated. A message from Katya: tomorrow will be fun. Get ready, I've organized everything. There will be a surprise. Dasha smiled and replied with an emoji. Tomorrow was her 30th birthday. A new chapter in her life. And although there was uncertainty ahead, she was no longer afraid. On the morning of the 19th, Dasha woke up to the sunlight beating down out the window. She got up, did some exercises, took a shower, dressed in jeans and a light sweater, and pulled her hair back into a ponytail. It promised to be a long day. She had to arrive at the cafe by 6 p.m. to check everything and greet the first guests. Dasha had breakfast, tidied up the apartment, then took out her new dress and hung it on a hanger to straighten it out. Around 5 o'clock, she started getting ready, applied light makeup, styled her hair, put on the dress, and looked at herself in the mirror. It was quite decent, not a piano in the bushes, but not cheap either, modest and tasteful. In the middle of the 6th, she called a taxi. The driver arrived quickly, avoiding traffic jams. The Almond Café was located on a quiet side street. The small building with a wooden sign and cozy windows smelled of cinnamon and freshly baked goods inside. The administrator, a girl of about 20, greeted Dasha with a smile. "Good evening. You are Daria, we are waiting for you. The table is ready, I'll show you now." She led Dasha into the back room, where a long table for 20 was set. A white tablecloth, cutlery, and glasses. Small bouquets of wildflowers were in the center. Everything looked nice and neat. "Thank you," she said. "Dasha. It's very beautiful. Please, if you need anything, please ask. The waiters will be nearby." Guests began to trickle in. First came Katya and her husband, then colleagues from work, then distant relatives, friends from university. People sat down, made noise, laughed. Dasha stood at the entrance, greeted everyone, hugged them, accepted congratulations. At precisely 7 o'clock, Lada Mikhailovna appeared. She was dressed in a formal burgundy pantsuit. Her hair was neatly styled in a short cut. On her lips, bright lipstick. She looked, as always, confident and a little haughty. "Dashenka, congratulations." Lada Mikhailovna handed over a bouquet of roses and a box of chocolates. "I wish you happiness, health, and prosperity." "Thank you," Dasha replied dryly, accepting the flowers. "Can I sit over there at the end?" Lada Mikhailovna pointed to an empty seat so as not to disturb anyone. "Of course, sit wherever you feel comfortable," Dasha allowed. Lada Mikhailovna walked to the table, sat down, and looked around at the guests with an appraising glance. Dasha followed her with her eyes and felt a slight twinge of anxiety. Why did she come? Just to congratulate? Unlikely. Lada Mikhailovna always had a plan. Always. But now was not the time to think about it. Dasha returned to the guests, raised a glass of champagne, and gave a short speech of gratitude. Everyone clapped, drank to the birthday girl, and began serving appetizers. The evening went on as usual, conversations, jokes, toasts. Katya organized several competitions. Guess a song by its melody, compose congratulations from given words. The people cheered up, the atmosphere became warm and relaxed. Dasha sat at the head of the table, listening to friends' stories, laughed at colleagues' jokes. Lada Mikhailovna was silent, occasionally nodding, eating something, but Dasha felt her gaze on her, heavy, scrutinizing. Around 8 p.m., the waiters brought out a large, 3-tiered cake, decorated with strawberries and whipped cream. 30 candles burned on it. The guests sang, "Happy Birthday." Dasha made a wish and blew out the candles. Everyone applauded. It was at that moment that Lada Mikhailovna leaned toward her son. Dasha only now noticed that Kirill was there too. He was sitting next to his mother, silent, with an absent look. When he managed to arrive, Dasha hadn't invited him. Lada Mikhailovna quickly whispered something in Kirill's ear. Dasha was just leaving the table, carrying an empty glass to the bar to ask for more champagne. She passed their place and accidentally overheard a fragment of a phrase, "While everything is here, go and change the locks on her apartment." Dasha froze for a second. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned around. Kirill nodded to his mother, muttered something, and quickly got up from the table. He took out his phone, put it to his ear, and mimed. "Concern. Sorry, urgent call," he threw into the air and headed for the exit. Dasha stood at the counter, clutching an empty glass in her hand. Dozens of thoughts flashed through her head. So this is why Lada Mikhailovna asked to come to the party. This is why she dragged her son along. They were going to change the locks on the apartment while she was here, in the cafe, surrounded by guests. Only they didn't know one thing. The apartment was no longer hers. The apartment was sold. Dasha slowly exhaled, pulled herself together, returned to the table, sat down in her place, and raised a glass of champagne. A friend was telling her something about her vacation. Everyone was listening and laughing. Dasha smiled, nodded, pretending to listen. But inside, she was chilled by a quiet triumph. They were going to Chistoprudny, call a locksmith, try changing the locks, and a surprise awaited them there. Lada Mikhailovna sat in her seat, sipping wine, occasionally glancing at her watch. Dasha watched her out of the corner of her eye. Her mother-in-law looked tense but satisfied. She clearly believed the plan was on track. Half an hour passed, then another 20 minutes. The guests continued to have fun. Katya started karaoke, and someone started singing. Dasha sang along, clapped, but inside she was counting down the minutes. Exactly an hour later, the cafe door swung open and Kirill walked in. His face was pale, almost gray, his hands trembling. He quickly crossed the room, approached his mother, and leaned toward her ear. Dasha saw his lips move, how he hurriedly whispered something. She saw Lada Mikhailovna's face slowly change. From smugness to confusion, then to horror. Lada Mikhailovna grabbed her son. She grabbed him by the elbow, stood up abruptly, and dragged him toward the exit. Kirill followed her, stumbling and muttering something. They disappeared into the hallway. Dasha finished her champagne and set the glass on the table. A strange feeling was spreading inside her. Neither malice nor revenge, just a calm satisfaction, a sense of justice. They wanted to steal from her what she had toiled for 7 years for, but all they got was emptiness. A few minutes later, Lada Mikhailovna returned to the hall. Her face was contorted, her lips pressed tightly together. She walked to her seat, grabbed her bag, and threw on her coat. Dasha watched her out of glance. Their eyes met for a second. Dasha smiled. That same smile she usually used to thank for compliments, soft, polite, and completely dispassionate. Lada Mikhailovna understood everything without words, froze, turned even paler, then turned and left without saying goodbye. The party lasted until 11 p.m. The guests left satisfied, hugging Dasha goodbye and wishing her happiness. Katya stayed to help. "Listen, what happened with your ex-mother-in-law?" she asked, folding napkins. She looked kind of pale. "I don't know," Dasha shrugged. "I guess she felt bad." "Oh well," Katya waved her hand. "The main thing is that everything went well for you. Did you like it?" "Very much," Dasha answered sincerely. "Thank you for everything." They hugged. Katya left. Dasha called a taxi and went home. In the car, she took out her phone, saw several missed calls from Kirill, and opened the message. The first, "Dasha, what are you doing?" The second, "You sold the apartment, how could you?" The third, "This is mean, you set it all up on purpose." Dasha chuckled and blocked the number. There was no point in answering, everything had already been said. At home, she changed her clothes, washed herself, and went to bed. The city was noisy at night outside the window. Cars were humming somewhere in the distance. Dasha closed her eyes and for the first time in many months, she slept peacefully, without disturbing thoughts, without fears. She had done what she had to do, protected herself, and now she could move on with her life. The morning after the anniversary began with the phone silent. Dasha woke up late, around 10 o'clock, well-rested and, surprisingly, cheerful. The sun was shining through the window, and the room was warm. She stretched, stood up, and went into the kitchen to put the kettle on. The phone was lying on the table, the screen dark. Dasha unlocked it and looked at it. A few congratulations from yesterday's guests, a couple of photos from the holiday from Katya, and another message that had arrived last night from an unfamiliar number. "You'll regret this. We'll find a way to get the apartment back. It's our family property." Dasha shook her head and deleted the message. Lada Mikhailovna's threats didn't touch her. What family property? The apartment was registered to Kirill. Then it was transferred to her by court order, legally, cleanly, without any exceptions. And the fact that she sold her property is her personal matter. There can be no claims. She poured tea, sat by the window, and looked out onto the street. Passers-by were hurrying about their business. Someone was walking their dog, someone was carrying bags from the store. An ordinary life, measured, calm, her new life. The phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Dasha thought for a second, then finally answered. "Hello, Daria Sergeyevna." A man's voice rang out. A little worried. "This is Anton. We bought an apartment from you, remember?" "Yes, of course, I remember." "Hello. Did something happen?" "Well, how should I say it?" Anton hesitated. "Last night, some guy came to us with a locksmith. They tried to change the locks. They said that the apartment is theirs, that we are living here illegally." Dasha smirked. "And what did you do?" "Yeah, at first I was completely stunned, sorry. I thought they were some kind of scammers. I asked for documents, they started hesitating. I called my colleagues at the duty station. A squad arrived, they filed a report. This guy said that he was a former owner's husband, said the apartment was supposed to remain his. I showed them our purchase agreement and the title deed. Anyway, they were kicked out, but he threatened to go to court." "Let him do so," Dasha said calmly. "Your documents are all in order. The deal was clean, certified by a notary. There can be no claims against you. And if they come again, call the police immediately, don't talk. It's trespassing." "That's what we'll do," he breathed a sigh of relief. "Anton. I just thought I should warn you, in case they come up with something else. Thanks for calling. Don't worry, everything will be fine." They said goodbye. Dasha put the phone down and thought. So, yesterday Kirill had gone to Chistoprudny with a locksmith, tried to change the locks, and there he was met by Anton, the local police officer, a man who, by virtue of his job, knows how to act in such situations. Ironically, Dasha imagined this scene. Kirill with the locksmith at the door. And then the door opens. A sullen man in casual clothes stands on the threshold. Kirill starts explaining his rights. And the man takes out his ID. "I'm a district police officer. Are you trying to break into someone else's home?" Kirill's face when he realized he was in trouble, how he tried to justify himself, muttering something about a mistake, a misunderstanding, how he called his mother, reported how she told him to come back immediately. Dasha laughed quietly to herself, not maliciously, simply at the absurdity of the situation. Lada Mikhailovna had planned everything so carefully, was moving so confidently toward her goal, and she ran into a wall. And the wall, which Dasha had built in advance, quietly, without any unnecessary noise. The doorbell rang. Dasha became tense, went over, and looked through the peephole. A courier was standing on the landing with a large bouquet of flowers. "Daria Sergeyevna?" he asked when she opened the door. "Yes, it's a delivery for you. Please sign." Dasha signed and took the bouquet. A huge armful of white lilies and pink peonies. "Beautiful, darling. Who could have sent this?" She opened the card. "Dashenka, happy anniversary. May the new year bring you joy. Yours, Aunt Marina." Dasha smiled. Aunt Marina, her father's sister, lived in Sochi. They rarely saw each other, but they corresponded. The kind woman always remembered birthdays and holidays. Dasha put the bouquet in a vase and poured some water. The flowers immediately transformed the room, adding coziness. She sent her aunt a thank you message and received a scattering of hearts and wishes for happiness in response. The day dragged on. Dasha cleaned the house, cooked dinner, and watched a couple of episodes of a TV series. In the evening, Katya called her. "Listen, you won't believe what I'm doing today. I found out," my friend began without preamble. "Remember that mother-in-law of yours who was here yesterday? You know, the one who was acting weird." "I remember. So, my friend works in the area where she lives. I ran into her by chance at the store today. She says she was all worked up, yelling at the salesperson over a small change, almost causing a scene, then stormed out of the store, muttering something under her breath." Dasha chuckled. "Well, everyone has bad days." "No, the funny thing is, she was saying something about the apartment. About the deception. My friend didn't really listen, but she remembered bits and pieces, like it was all a setup. We'll get ours back. Anyway, there was definitely some kind of story there." "There was a story," Dasha confirmed. "But it's over now. Will you tell me someday?" "Someday," Dasha promised. They chatted some more about all sorts of nonsense. Katya thanked her again for the previous evening. Then they said goodbye. Dasha lay down on the sofa and covered herself with a blanket. It was getting dark outside, the streetlights were turning on. The room became dim and quiet. She closed her eyes, thinking about what would happen next. Lada Mikhailovna is unlikely to back down so easily. She's the kind of person who can't lose. She'll look for ways, loopholes, options. Maybe she'll try to sue, challenge the deal. Although, on what grounds? The apartment was Dasha's property. She had every right to sell it, or she could try to pressure him through Kirill, force him to file complaints and statements, but that would be futile. The deal was executed according to all the rules. Notarized, registered with Rosregistre. There's nothing to complain about. Dasha understood that the most important thing now was to remain calm, not give in to provocations, not get into arguments. She simply had to move on, build her life, without looking back. The next day, Monday, she went to work. Co-workers congratulated her and asked how the holiday went. Dasha answered briefly, without going into details. The day passed as usual, reports, meetings, planning sessions. That evening, when she was returning home, an unfamiliar number called her again. This time, a female voice. "Daria, this is Svetlana, Anton's wife. We're at your apartment. We bought it." "Hello," Dasha answered, stopping at the entrance. "Did something happen?" No, everything's fine," Svetlana hastened to reassure. "I just wanted to thank you. Anton told us about that situation with his ex-husband. We realized that you probably knew they might try to do something, and you still sold us the apartment fairly, at a reasonable price. You didn't jack up the price, you didn't deceive us. Thank you very much." Dasha was touched. "You're welcome, honestly. I just wanted the apartment to go to good people. And you are exactly that. We try very hard." Svetlana laughed. "The renovation of the nursery is almost finished. My son is delighted. If you are ever nearby, come visit, we will have tea." "Definitely," Dasha promised. "Thank you for the invitation." They said goodbye. Dasha went up to her room, took off her shoes, changed her clothes, made tea in the kitchen, and sat by the window. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Kirill. She blocked his number, but he wrote from another one. "Dasha, we need to talk." Is this serious? Dasha thought about it. She didn't want to talk to him. She wanted to, but maybe she should put an end to it, so he understands that he won't achieve anything, that it's all over. She answered briefly. What can we talk about? The answer came almost instantly. About the apartment. You had no right to sell it without my consent. Dasha grinned and typed out the answer. The apartment was my property by court order. I had every right to dispose of it as I pleased. Read the civil code at your leisure. Mom says you can challenge in court that you sold property acquired during the marriage. Property acquired by me alone. You haven't paid a penny on the mortgage in 7 years. I still have all the receipts, all the payment slips. You can go to court, they'll explain everything to you there. A few minutes of silence, then another message. You're just taking revenge for the fact that we got divorced. Dasha shook her head and answered for the last time. I'm not taking revenge. I'm defending what's mine. Do you feel the difference? Leave me alone, Kirill. Move on. I don't owe you anything. She blocked that number too. She wasn't going to answer anymore. Everything that needed to be said had been said. A week passed. Dasha went to work, met with friends. Practiced yoga in the evenings. Life was returning to a calmer rhythm. No calls from Kirill, no threats from Lada Mikhailovna. Silence. Dasha had almost relaxed, thinking that everything was behind her. But on Saturday morning, when she was returning from the store with bags of groceries, Lada Mikhailovna was waiting for her at the entrance. Her mother-in-law was standing near the entrance, dressed in a long coat and dark glasses. When Dasha approached, she took off her glasses and looked straight into her eyes. I need to talk to you, she said in a cool, even tone. We have nothing to talk about, Dasha replied, taking out the keys to the intercom. Of course there is. Lada Mikhailovna stepped closer. You stole the apartment from us. I didn't steal it. I sold my property. This apartment was mine. Her mother-in-law's voice rose. I bought it. I transferred it to Kirill. This is our family nest. And you ruined it. Dasha turned around and looked at her calmly. Lada Mikhailovna, the apartment was registered in Kirill's name, then it was transferred to me by court order, legally and finally. I paid the mortgage for 7 years. Alone. It's my right to dispose of what I paid for. You have nothing to do with this. I mean, Lada Mikhailovna clenched her fist. This was my investment in my son's future. And you ruined it all. You sold the apartment specifically to spite us. I sold the apartment to protect myself, Dasha corrected, because I knew you would try to take it away. And you tried. On the day of my anniversary, you sent Kirill to change the locks while I was sitting in the cafe. You thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't understand. Lada Mikhailovna turned pale. Took a step back. Were you eavesdropping? I overheard by accident. Dasha opened the intercom, dialed the number, and realized she'd done the right thing by selling the apartment in advance. Can you imagine what you looked like when Kirill returned, when you realized other people were already living there? The local police officer opened the door for him, by the way. A police officer. I can imagine how scared you were. Lada Mikhailovna stood silently, her lips trembling. You set us up. I protected myself, Dasha repeated. It's your own fault. Greed ruined you. You could have simply accepted the decision of the court, move on with your life, but no, you absolutely had to take away what doesn't belong to you. Well, now we've got the result. We'll sue, Lada Mikhailovna hissed. We'll prove the deal was illegal. Go ahead and file it, Dasha answered calmly. All my documents are in order. The deal is notarized and registered with Rosregister. The buyers are law-abiding citizens, everything has been paid for, everything is clear. You'll only waste time and money. She entered the entrance. The door closed behind her. Lada Mikhailovna remained standing. Outside, lost, pale. Dasha went up to her floor, entered the apartment, put the bags in the kitchen, leaned against the wall, and took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from tension. The conversation with Lada Mikhailovna had been exhausting, but she held on, didn't lose it, didn't say anything unnecessary, just told the truth. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "You'll regret it." Dasha deleted the message and blocked the number. How much longer could this go on? How long would they try to intimidate her? She took out her phone and dialed the number. Of Anton. "Hello, Anton. This is Daria Sergeevna. I have a question. If I keep receiving threats from my ex-mother-in-law, what can I do? Should I file a police report?" Anton replied. "Threats are serious. Save all messages, record conversations if she calls. Then bring them to the police station. We'll draw up a report." "Understood. Thank you. If anything happens, call us, we'll help." Dasha hung up, which means if it continues, I'll have to contact the police. But for now, she'll just block all the numbers. She'll cut off contact. Maybe Lada Mikhailovna will calm down and realize she won't get anywhere. A few more days passed. The threats stopped, there were no more calls. Dasha began to forget about this whole thing, focusing on work, her plans, her future. One evening, she was sitting at home, sorting through documents, and found an old photograph. Her wedding with Kirill. Young, happy, with smiles from ear to ear. She was 23, he was 28. They believed they had a long life together, children and grandchildren, ahead of them, but life didn't work out. Dasha stared at the photo for another minute, then tore it in half and threw it in the trash. The past was in the past. Time to look forward. On Saturday, she went to the bank to open her last deposit. The line was short, just a few people. Dasha stood at the end, took out her phone, and started scrolling through the news. A tall man in jeans and a jacket stood in front of her. He was talking on the phone, laughing. The voice sounded familiar. Dasha looked up and froze. It was the same Anton, the police officer who had bought the apartment from her. He ended the conversation, turned around, saw her, and smiled. "Oh, Daria Sergeevna, what a meeting. Are you going to the bank too?" "Yes," Dasha nodded, smiling back. "To open a deposit. We are too. Svetlana sent me away, saying, we need to put the money at interest, otherwise it's sitting at home, no use." They got to talking. Anton told her about the renovation, about his son, who adores the new apartment. Dasha listened, happy that everything worked out well for them. "By the way," Anton remembered, "that mother-in-law of yours is more. Didn't show up?" Total silence. "Me too," Dasha replied. She probably realized it was useless. "Well, good. The main thing is that they leave you alone." They were called to the managers. They went to different windows, waved goodbye to each other. Dasha opened a deposit, received the documents, and left the bank. The sun was shining outside, a light breeze was blowing. It was the beginning of November, but the weather was warm, almost autumnal. Dasha walked down the street, thinking about how strange things sometimes turn out. She sold the apartment to random people, and they turned out to be good, decent people. They helped her unwittingly, simply by being in the right place at the right time. And Lada Mikhailovna, with her plans, intrigues, and attempts to control everything, lost simply because she underestimated Dasha. She thought she would endure, remain silent, and obey, but Dasha turned out to be stronger. In the evening, she sat at home, drank tea, and looked out the window. The phone lay nearby, silent. No threats, no calls. Silence. A truly calm silence. 2 months had passed since that anniversary. December covered the city with snow and pre-New Year's fuss. Dasha went to work, met with friends, planned how to spend the holidays. Life flowed smoothly, without shocks or surprises. There was no sign of Kirill or Lada Mikhailovna. Silence. Dasha sometimes caught herself thinking that she was still expecting a catch. It had all ended too easily. But days passed, weeks passed, and there were no new attempts to reach her. One Saturday, Dasha went to the shopping center on Taganka, wanting to buy New Year's gifts. She wandered the floors, went into stores, tried on scarves and gloves. There were a lot of people. Lines at the checkout, festive music blaring from the speakers. She was standing by the bookstore window, looking at the new releases, when she spotted a familiar figure out of the corner of her eye and turned around. A few meters away, Lada Mikhailovna was walking alone, wearing an old coat and a shabby shoulder bag. She looked aged and tired. She walked slowly, looking absent-mindedly around. Dasha froze, unsure how to react. Turn away, leave. But at that moment, their eyes met. Lada Mikhailovna stopped, her face twitched, stood there for a second, then abruptly turned and walked away. Dasha watched her go. There was no triumph or gloating inside. Only a strange emptiness. This woman had once been her mother-in-law. For 7 years, they had seen each other at family dinners on holidays. Lada Mikhailovna had never received Dasha, considering her unworthy of her son, and now she walked past without saying a word. Dasha sighed, returned to the display case, chose a couple of books for her friend Katya, paid, and continued on her way. On the 3rd floor, she stopped by a toy store, wanting to buy something for Svetlana and Anton's son. Svetlana had recently written again, inviting her over, and Dasha decided she should finally stop by. She chose a brightly colored construction set with cars. He's just the right age for such things. She paid for it and asked for it to be gift-wrapped. As she was leaving the store with the bags, she saw Lada Mikhailovna again. She was standing by the fountain on the 1st floor, talking on the phone. Her voice was loud and irritated. I told you, there's no money. Where would they come from? Kirill still doesn't have a normal job. I live on my pension. Dasha involuntarily slowed down. She listened. What lawyer? Lada Mikhailovna continued. Do you realize how much this costs? I already paid Vitaly Semyonovich 5,000 for a consultation. The result was 0. He himself said the deal was clean, there was nothing to complain about. A pause. Then again, so what do we do now? Accept it. She sold all this, pocketed the money, and were left with nothing. Dasha turned away and headed for the exit. She didn't want to listen any further. She even felt a little awkward eavesdropping on other people's conversations, other people's problems. Even if it concerned her own. It was frosty outside, the snow crunched underfoot. Dasha walked to the bus stop, got on the bus, and went home. On the way, she thought about Lada Mikhailovna, about Kirill. They really were left with nothing. They hadn't returned the apartment, they had no money for lawyers, and they had no strength to continue the fight. But was that her fault? She hadn't taken anything from them, she had simply defended her rights, earned through 7 years of mortgage payments. If only. Lada Mikhailovna accepted the court's decision, resigned herself to it, everything would have been different. But she wanted more, wanted to take back what was left, and lost. Dasha came home, unpacked her groceries, made some tea, sat by the window, and watched the snowflakes swirl outside. Her phone was lying nearby, and the screen lit up. A message from Svetlana. Dasha, come over for lunch on Sunday. Anton will be cooking, we'll be happy to hear from you. Dasha smiled and said yes. She wrote that she'd bought a gift for their son. Svetlana sent a whole bunch of love in response. A scattering of grateful emoticons. On Sunday, Dasha went to Chistoprudny. It was a strange feeling to return to where she had lived for 7 years. The same entrance, the same elevator, only life was different now. Anton opened the door and smiled broadly. Come in, we're waiting for you." The apartment had changed. Different wallpaper, different furniture. There was a children's corner with toys in the room. Pictures hung on the walls. It smelled of something delicious, fried meat and spices. Svetlana came out of the kitchen and hugged Dasha. "How good that you came. Come in, sit down, right now. We'll have dinner." Their son, a curly-haired boy of about 3, peeked out from behind his mother's skirt and looked at Dasha curiously. "This is Dasha's aunt," Svetlana introduced. "Say hello." "Hi," the boy muttered and hid again. Dasha laughed and handed Svetlana a bag with a construction set. "I hope he likes this." "Oh, thank you so much." Svetlana unwrapped the package and showed it to her son. "Look what your aunt brought you." The boy perked up, grabbed the box, and ran into the room to unpack. They sat down at the table. Anton brought the roast. Svetlana was serving salads. They talked about various things: work, holiday plans, renovations. The atmosphere was warm and cozy. Dasha felt right at home. "By the way," Anton remembered, pouring tea, "I recently ran into some guy in the store. He recognized me and started asking about the apartment. He said it should have been his, that the deal was illegal. I explained that everything was legal, that we were the owners. He mumbled something for a while, then left. Kirill, Dasha, my ex-husband, said calmly. And that's it. Yeah, that's what I thought. He seemed kind of lost, or something. He kept trying to prove something, but he kept mixing up his words and getting confused. Anyway, I told him clearly, don't bother us. Everything is legal here. He didn't show up again." Dasha nodded. So, Kirill was still trying to do something, but without energy, without confidence, just out of inertia. "Don't worry," she said. "He's not dangerous, he just can't come to terms with it." "We're not worried," Svetlana smiled. "We've got everything here." "Good. The apartment is wonderful, the area is great. Thank you again for selling it to us. This is truly a blessing for us." Dasha looked at them, at this young family, at their joy, at the comfort they had created within these walls. She didn't regret the sale, or the divorce, or how it all turned out. It was the right choice. The only right one. They sat at the table until evening, talking, laughing, drinking tea and eating the cake Svetlana had baked. The boy played with his construction set, running over from time to show off what he'd built. As Dasha was getting ready to leave, Anton walked her to the door. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about this. You could have sold this apartment for more. The realtors probably offered to raise the price, but you sold it to us at a reasonable price." "Why?" Dasha thought about it. "Because I wanted good people to live here. Not investors, not speculators, but a real family." "You are exactly that." Anton nodded and shook her hand. "Thank you. We will try to justify your trust." Dasha went outside. She called a taxi. While she waited, she stood at the entrance, looking at the windows of the 4th-floor apartment. The light was on. Shadows flickered behind the curtains. Another family lived there, another life. And her life was now elsewhere. The taxi arrived, she got in, and gave the address. The car drove along snowy streets past decorated shop windows, past Christmas trees, past people strolling. Soon it would be New Year's, a new era. At home, Dasha changed her clothes, lay down on the sofa, and turned on the TV. They were showing some comedy. She watched, half listening. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Dasha frowned and opened it. You think you've won, but it's not the end. Dasha chuckled, deleted the message, and blocked the number. How much longer can this go on? Lada Mikhailovna clearly didn't know how to lose, but it didn't matter anymore. Dasha had done her job, defended herself, and built a new life. And what her ex-mother-in-law thought, wrote, or planned was no longer her concern. The following week, Dasha was offered a promotion at work. The department head was leaving for another position, and she was being considered as a replacement. The salary was higher, there was more responsibility, but the prospects were also interesting. Dasha agreed, almost without hesitation. Why not? She'd been working at this company for 6 years, knew all the processes, and the team respected her. It was a step forward, exactly what she needed right now. On Friday, she was officially introduced to her new position. Colleagues congratulated her and gave her flowers. Katya brought a cake, and they had a small celebration right in the office. Well then, Katya said, hugging Dasha goodbye. A new life, a new job, everything is changing for the better. Yes, she agreed. Dasha. It seemed so. She was driving home in high spirits, turning on music and singing along. City lights, decorated streets, and festive bustle flashed past the window. Life went on, and she was a part of it, not broken, not defeated, but free. A few days later, she went to the bank again. She needed to fill out some paperwork for her new position. She stood in line, scrolling through her phone. Someone ahead of her was talking loudly and laughing. The voice seemed familiar. She looked up, and that same Anton was discussing something with an employee of the bank, nodded, smiled. When he finished, he turned around and saw Dasha. "Oh, we meet again," he said happily. "Are you also here on business?" "Yes. I need to complete some paperwork. I got a promotion." "Congratulations." Anton shook her hand. "That's great." They chatted a little. Anton told her that Svetlana got a new job. Their son started kindergarten. Life is getting better. Everything is good. By the way, Anton remembered, I wanted to ask you. We're having a small party on New Year's. Friends, relatives, maybe you'd like to come? Svetlana will be happy. Dasha paused. She usually spent New Year's with her friends or alone, but why not spend it with new acquaintances, people who had become part of her new life? "Thank you for the invitation," she said. "I'll think about it." "Okay, of course, if you decide. Call me, you know the address." They said goodbye. Dasha completed the paperwork and left the bank. It was frosty outside, but sunny. She walked along the sidewalk, thinking about how strangely everything was intertwined. She sold the apartment to random people, and they became almost friends to her. They invite you to the holidays. Share news and support each other. And her ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband are a thing of the past. Angry, offended, but powerless. They tried to take everything away, but lost everything, even self-respect. That evening, Dasha was sitting at home, drinking coffee, looking out the window. Snow was falling in large flakes and covering the city with a white blanket. New Year's is coming soon, new hopes, new plans. The phone vibrated. A call from Katya. "Dasha, what are you doing for New Year's? Maybe you'll come to my place. We'll get together and celebrate." "Thanks, Katya. But my friends invited me. I think I'll go see them." "What friends?" Katya was surprised. "The ones I sold the apartment to. The family is good, we became friends." "Wow. You're something else." "Okay, the main thing is that you have a good time. And we'll get together another time." "Definitely," Dasha promised. She celebrated the new year in an apartment on Chistoprodny. About 10 people had gathered at Anton and Svetlana's, relatives, friends, colleagues. The table was groaning with food. Music was playing, everyone was laughing, drinking champagne. When the chimes began to strike, everyone stood up, raised their glasses, made a wish. Dasha stood by the window, looking at the festive city, with fireworks flashing in the sky. She made one simple wish, for the new year to be calm, without shocks, without drama. Just a normal, measured life. After the chimes, Anton approached her and held out a glass. "Happy New Year, Daria Sergeevna. Thank you for coming. It means a lot to us." "Thank you for inviting me," Dasha replied. "I'm very pleased." "You know," Anton said, looking out the window, "I sometimes wonder how everything works out. You sold us an apartment. It seemed like a normal deal, but it turned out that you helped us start a new life. And you helped yourself too. We found a way out of a difficult situation." Dasha nodded. "Life is a strange thing. Sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning." "Exactly," Anton agreed. They stood in silence. Then Anton's wife called. He left. Dasha stayed by the window, looking at the city, the lights, the snow. She thought about last year, about the divorce, about the fight with Lada Mikhailovna, about selling the apartment. How much of everything had happened, had taken so much strength. But she had coped, hadn't broken down, hadn't given up, had simply done what she had to do, had protected herself, and now she could breathe freely. A week after the holidays, when the city was still living in anticipation of the long weekend, Dasha went into the shopping center to buy groceries, stood at the checkout, paid, and suddenly saw Lada Mikhailovna. She was standing in the next line, paying for bread and milk, looking tired, aged. Their eyes met for a moment. Lada Mikhailovna turned pale. Turned away, quickly picked up the bag and headed for the exit. Dasha watched her go. Nothing stirred inside. No pity, no malice. Just emptiness. This woman no longer had any connection with her. Dasha took her purchases and went outside. The day was frosty and sunny. The sun blinded her eyes. She took out her phone and looked at the screen. A message from Svetlana. A photo of their son with his new toy. The caption, "Thank you for the gift. He never parts with his construction set." Dasha smiled, replied with a heart, and put her phone in her pocket and headed to the bus stop. Ahead lay a normal life, work, friends, plans, no ex-husbands, no toxic mothers-in-law, no fighting for what was rightfully hers. She won this war neither by force nor by cunning, but simply with intelligence and calm. Lada Mikhailovna wanted to take the apartment away, staged a spectacle for her anniversary, sent her son to change the locks, and Dasha simply sold what was hers. And that was it, end of story. The bus pulled up. Dasha sat by the window. The city floated past outside the glass. Gray houses, snow-covered streets. The occasional passers-by. An ordinary January day. An ordinary life. Her life. In the evening, she sat at home, reading a book. The phone was silent. No threats, no calls. Silence. Real, deep silence. Dasha leaned back on the pillow and closed her eyes. Ahead was the new year, a new position at work, new acquaintances, new opportunities. The past was behind her. Along with the mortgage she had been paying off for 7 years. Along with her husband, who didn't want to work. Along with her mother-in-law, who considered Dasha unworthy of her family. Now all this didn't matter. Dasha had built a new life, the one she wanted, and no one could ruin it anymore. She opened her eyes and looked at the clock. 10 p.m. Time for bed. Tomorrow was a work day, she needed to get some sleep. Dasha got up, went to the bedroom, lay down on the bed, covered herself with the blanket, and turned off the light. The city hummed outside. Cars were driving somewhere, people were strolling somewhere else. Life was going on as usual, and Dasha was a part of it. Not a victim of circumstances, not a broken woman, but simply a person who made the right choice at the right time. She closed her eyes and fell asleep peacefully, without disturbing dreams or fears. A new day lay ahead, and she was ready to face it. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to stay up to date with new heartwarming stories, and leave a comment. I'm always interested in your opinion.